This is Leader Time by FedNet for April 8th. Thank you for tuning in. Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer spoke on the Senate floor as the Senate was poised to process nominations. Thune discussed energy regulations as Congressional Review Act resolutions were prepared for floor action. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, over the last 4 years, the Biden administration put our energy security on a dangerous trajectory. The administration sharply restricted oil and gas development. It threatened the closure of existing power plants with burdensome new regulations, even as our electric grid struggled to keep up with demand. President Biden attempted to force the widespread adoption of electric cars, despite the incredible strain that would place on our already shaky power grid. And that's just to start with. The administration unleashed a veritable blizzard of Green New Deal regulations as it attempted to push through its far-left agenda. Mr. President, the American people called for a new direction this past November, and the Trump administration and the Republican majorities in Congress have wasted no time getting to work to provide relief from burdensome regulations, especially when it comes to energy. Last month, the EPA announced 31 significant deregulatory actions. Among these are actions addressing the Biden administration's Good Neighbor Rule and Clean Power Plan 2.0. Both of these regulations were designed to effectively force fossil fuel-powered power plants to close, a dangerous goal at a time when we are already running low on the electricity we need to meet demand. And preventing these Biden-era rules from going into effect removes a significant threat to our energy supply. Farmers, ranchers, and other landowners can also breathe more easily knowing that the Obama-era Waters of the United States rule, which the Biden administration attempted to resurrect, is being revised. The so-called WOTUS rule would have given the federal government sweeping jurisdiction over most water features on private property, including things like irrigation ditches, ephemeral streams, and even prairie potholes. I know farmers and ranchers in my state of South Dakota would have appreciated a seat at the table before the Biden administration resurrected this harmful policy. And I'm pleased that the Trump administration is committed to consulting with stakeholders for their input on an alternative clean water rule. Mr. President, the EPA is also now working to terminate the Biden electric vehicle mandate. The switch to electric vehicles that the Biden administration envisioned was unwelcome, unworkable, and unaffordable for a lot of Americans. And as I said, threatened to put an incredible new strain on our already creaky electric grid. I know South Dakotans were concerned about the loss of choice and about being forced into electric vehicles that aren't suitable for the long distances and bitter cold of life on the Great Plains. So the elimination of this mandate is welcome news in South Dakota, as I'm sure it is for a lot of Americans around the country. Mr. President, here in Congress, we're joining the President in his deregulatory efforts, and Republican majorities in the House and the Senate have spent the last several weeks working to rescind burdensome energy regulations using the Congressional Review Act. President Trump has already signed 2 CRA resolutions into law, one eliminating the marine archaeology rule that targeted offshore energy development, and the other stopping implementation of the Biden tax on natural gas. Last week, the Senate passed another CRA resolution to block a Biden-era regulation on walk-in freezers and coolers. This rule, part of the Biden administration's climate agenda, would have heaped additional cost on small businesses like restaurants, butchers, convenience stores, and others. And later this week, I expect the Senate to vote on another energy-related CRA resolution, this one to block a Biden administration rule that would take certain gas water heaters off the market by 2029. This rule would not only increase the cost of water heaters for American homeowners, it would also imperil U.S. manufacturing jobs. One manufacturer has said the rule could force a shutdown of its $70 million plant in Georgia. The resolution to repeal this burdensome rule received bipartisan support in the House, and I hope our Democrat colleagues will join Republicans in opposing this regulation. Mr. President, the impact of these regulations is felt across industries by American workers and American businesses. They're felt by Americans who work in the energy sector, by manufacturers, by small business owners, farmers, ranchers, and the list goes on. And regulatory burdens can be especially tough on smaller businesses, sometimes leading them to sell or shutter their operations. Those who stay in business often have to raise prices to stay afloat. And whether it's through higher utility bills or higher costs at the grocery store or for other goods, it's the American people who ultimately bear the cost of these rules. And that's why this is such an important issue for Republicans. It's why we're working hard to eliminate these and many other regulatory burdens. And we will continue working to deliver regulatory relief for the American people.
For his part, Schumer discussed impacts of the Liberation Day tariffs, the fiscal 2026 budget resolution, and more.
I'd like to begin by reading a quote from Bill Ackman, the billionaire well known for his support of Donald Trump. "We are headed," he said, "we are headed for a self-induced economic nuclear winter, and we should start hunkering down." Preston Caldwell, excuse me. Preston Caldwell, a senior economist for Morningstar Research, likewise said, "If they're maintained," this is his quote, "if they're maintained, the tariff hikes announced April 2nd represent a self-inflicted economic catastrophe for the United States." Meanwhile, Larry Fink of BlackRock says most CEOs he has spoken to would say we have already entered a recession. The damage of Donald Trump's tariff tax has already been done. And regardless of what the markets say from 1 hour to the next, there are no signs that the chaos is changing at any time soon. Americans are anxious. Nobody looking at their retirement accounts today is feeling anything close to liberated. It has been a hellacious few days for people worried about their 401ks and their savings and their kids' future. And that's not changing anytime soon. Before things get worse, Donald Trump should immediately reverse his reckless trade war. He should halt his tariff tax at once. And he should start focusing more on America's actual trade adversaries like China, instead of picking a fight with the entire world and causing chaos and steering us towards a recession in the process. The chaos within the Trump administration was shown a few minutes ago when Elon Musk called Peter Navarro, the chief architect of these tariffs, a moron. That's Musk's word. He called him a moron. Their plan is so crazy, so controversial, that this administration cannot get its act together, with them calling names about each other, against one another, about this tariff plan. This is perhaps the most significant task for the Republican congressional leadership since Donald Trump became president. The choice in front of Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson is simple. Choose Donald Trump or choose American families. Stand up to Donald Trump or watch him trigger a recession. So this morning, I am writing to Speaker Johnson, urging him to put the Senate-passed resolution undoing Donald Trump's tariffs for a vote in the House. Let me quote from the letter, quote, "Plain and simple, the Trump trade war is a Trump tax on families, raising their costs by nearly $4,000 per year and devastating small businesses, forcing them to raise prices or lay off staff. It is a dangerous, foolish exercise that is wreaking havoc on the American economy and could very well tee up a recession. If the president doesn't back off, Congress must take action. The Senate has already taken action to provide relief from tariffs on Canada, and the House should follow immediately. Remember, this resolution affects Canada. Nobody understands what the heck the president is doing with Canada. It was bipartisan. It got 4 Republican votes and passed the Senate. So the Senate has done its part. Now the Speaker must act if he cares about avoiding a recession, if he cares about American families. I am confident that if Speaker Johnson were to put the Senate's Canada resolution on the floor, the bipartisan resolution we passed, that it would pass the House as well. In an additional matter, this morning, I am proud to be joining Senators Wyden, Kaine, as well as Senator Shaheen, Welch, Warren, and Senator Paul to introduce another resolution that would put a halt on all of Donald Trump's global policies. The letter I'm sending, the resolution we passed dealt with Canada. This deals with all of the global tariffs. I'm very proud to co-sponsor this legislation. The Senate has the power and authority to stop this madness, and we have a duty to act in a bipartisan way to repeal these tariffs. As you know, the previous resolution by Senator Kaine got 4 Republican votes here in the Senate. This resolution, would terminate the emergency that Donald Trump has declared in order to slap tariffs on 49% of products Americans buy from other countries. It would terminate that. Again, instead of picking a fight with the entire world, Donald Trump should be focused on going after America's actual adversaries. The Senate has the power and authority to stop Donald Trump's tariff madness. We Senate Democrats intend on making sure the Senate gets the chance to exercise that power. Senator Wyden's resolution is privileged and will be able to go to the floor of the Senate. Now on the budget. We are not even 100 days into Donald Trump's second term, and his presidency is already a dumpster fire. His tariffs, for one, are the largest tax hike on American families in half a century since the Vietnam War. His bumbling trade war wiped trillions of dollars from American retirement savings. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is crashing the Social Security website, shutting down local offices and disconnecting phone services. All these closures and firings show his real desire is to decimate Social Security. In March, employment for U.S. small businesses with 1 to 9 employees decreased by 98,000 jobs. Consumer confidence is at a 4-year low. Outlook for the economy is at a 12-year low. The odds of recession are at 60%. Some have argued, Larry Fink, that the recession has already started, according to the CEOs he's talked to. And what are Republicans in Congress doing about all this chaos, all this mess, all this severe harm to American families? Here's their answer. Cut taxes for billionaires. And why are they doing that? How are they going to pay for that? By taking away Americans' health care, making it harder for working families to put food on the table, slashing veterans' assistance and help for rural communities, kids, and Americans with disabilities. With the threats of a recession on the rise because of these tariffs, do House Republicans really want to sign their name on a bill that adds $37 trillion to the deficit? They should tread carefully. I said last Friday that for all the hand-wringing so far, the hard part for Republicans remains in front of them. The Republican agenda suffers from a fatal flaw. Its various pieces are all unpopular on their own, but when pieced together, it's even worse. That's why the Republicans are having such trouble coming together. It's not even to deal with Democrats. The House and Senate Republicans are at loggerheads. Members within each caucus, each Republican caucus, are at loggerheads. Why? Because the two policies are both unpopular. Slashing Medicaid, reducing taxes on billionaires. Americans don't like it, so the Republicans are tying themselves in a knot in trying to get this done against the will of the American people. Republicans in Congress want to cut taxes for billionaires and pay for it by taking away Americans' health care, making it harder for working families to put food on the table. This is incredible. With the threats of a recession on the rise because of these tariffs, do House Republicans really want to sign their name to this bill, as I said before? The bottom line is, sooner or later, Republicans are going to have to face the music. There aren't enough procedural gimmicks in the world to change the reality. The Republican agenda on both sides, slashing programs like health care that people need, tax cuts for billionaires, it's unpopular on both sides. It's not going to get any more popular moving forward, and the Republicans will have to tie themselves in lots of pretzel knots to even get a bill passed, such a highly unpopular bill passed. on Social Security. A few days ago, Vice President J.D. Vance claimed that 40% of people calling to get their Social Security, quote, are committing fraud. 40%. First, it was Elon Musk calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Then Donald Trump spent 10 minutes in his congressional address talking about checks to 150-year-olds, which we all know is a lie. And now the Vice President has picked up the axe and is coming for Social Security, too. We need to be very clear. What the Vice President said was malicious disinformation. His statement is factually incorrect. In the words of the Washington Post, it is, quote, absurdity on its face, the kind of twisted logic that turns up at the end of a long game of telephone tag, unquote. Well, we all know what game they're playing. Donald Trump and his inner circle are howling about fraud with the hopes of discrediting Social Security entirely. Never mind there's no rampant fraud within Social Security. They just want to cut people's benefits. Never mind that it's popular, overwhelmingly popular, with Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, rural people, suburban people, urban people. Why are they doing this then? Why are they going after something that has been as sacred as Social Security since Franklin Roosevelt put the program together? Why? Simple. So they can cut taxes for the rich. This is a heist. If J.D. Vance had any intellectual honesty, he would acknowledge he was wrong when he said 40% of the people who are calling are actually committing fraud. But I'm not holding my breath.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe and tell your friends about us. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited.